if your parents are getting older and need caregiving, but you're not the sibling who lives close to them, it is a good thing to do to ask the question that you are asking here in this comment. How do I help them? How do I lighten the load on the sibling who is doing much more than you are? First, perhaps a few things to maybe not do. One of the things to not do is to call your sibling, ask them if they're doing too much, and ask them to reassure you about their situation. This is not helpful, and you're just putting another task on their plate, which is giving you emotional support now, although you're not the person who needs the most help in that scenario. Also, if they're overwhelmed, which they might be, it is possible, it's not certain, but it's possible that it's going to be tough for them to identify what you could be doing to help them out. In any case, thinking about it is one more task, and they may or may not have the bandwidth for one more task, even if it's a task intended to help them in the end. So, what could you do instead? There is an exercise that if your caregiver sibling has the bandwidth to do, you could do together. And it would also help them, but they have to have the bandwidth to sit down with you, even if it's just on the phone, and do that with you. And if they are so overwhelmed that they don't have the bandwidth for that, you could start on your own and then loop them in at a later stage. The exercise is as follows. You make a list of everything that your parents need done for them. If you're doing it together, the caregiver sibling is likely to know more things about what your parents need than you will, but there are things you will be able to put on the list even without them. Things like, do your parents need to go to doctor's appointments? So doctor's appointments have to be made and then they have to be accompanied there. Are they cooking for themselves or does someone have to cook for them? What about groceries? What about laundry? What about washing and dressing? What about? So you make the list of everything you can think of that your parents need done for them, admin and so on. And then you highlight or underline or identify in some way things that could be outsourced to someone other than your caregiver sibling. At this stage, you may or may not know whether that's already been done. You may or may not know whether your caregiver sibling is actually doing those things. You're just preparing the work so that when you do it together, you can check your version against theirs. But importantly, when you're thinking about what could be done by others, some of those things you might actually be able to do. Even if you're far away, there are some administrative tasks you may be able to take on yourself. There are some telephone calls, some stuff that do not require physical presence that you might actually be able to take off the plate of your caregiver sibling. Also, they may need a vacation from caregiving, and you may be able to provide that if you yourself are able to take vacation and travel there to take over at least part of the work of caregiving for a while. If you are doing the list on your own, the next step is to check in with your sibling and say, I've been giving some thought as to how I could help you. Here's a few ideas I want to float by you, and you tell me what you think of them. Do they look realistic? Am I forgetting anything? I've done this list. I was thinking perhaps I could take over this, that, or that. How would you feel about that? Do our parents actually need this done? Are you doing it? Could it be outsourced to someone else? I'm concerned about how much you're doing. And you have a conversation with them and see whether there are things you could actually take off their plate. If you are able to make the list together with your caregiver sibling, it's of course better, but you have to understand if they can't. But if they can, you make the list together and you will realize a few things. First, you will realize that the list is longer than you thought. There are more things than you initially thought that caregivers have to do for the people they care for. Once you've finished doing the list, stop and think what else actually should go on the list, and usually you will have more things to add on that list. And then the other thing that you will find is when you identify what can be outsourced, what could be delegated to others, what you could do instead of them, you will realize that although your caregiver sibling may be doing a great many things, although they may be highly capable and doing a great many things very well, although they may actually be doing a great many things better than others would, there are far fewer things that only they can do. And they will do those things better, and they will have a better life for themselves if they manage to narrow down what they're doing closer to the must-have list than to the total list. Yeah.